Jerry Crasnick, ESPN.com, covers the Yankees, covers MLB, and we're coming up on the All-Star break next week. Jerry drops by for a few minutes here on 104.5 The Team, ESPN Radio, the home of the New York Yankees. Jerry, Rodger Weiland, along with Chris Honorado. Good morning.
How you guys doing?
We're good, Jerry, and always busy. Fun time of the year, though, with the break coming up. And let's just start with the All-Star announcements and 5 Yankees on the roster. And maybe Didi Gregorius also gets the fan vote, and we'll add another. Any surprises there that 5 Yankees would be on the roster, all deserving?
Well, obviously, Aaron Judge has dominated the news. I think if there was one Yankee I might have been a little surprised by, maybe Dellin Betances. I looked the other day. I think he's been amazing, with the strikeouts as usual, but I think he had 18 walks in 25 innings. So, he's walked a tightrope a little bit, but, still, obviously, a really dominant guy. And, I think when you look, at Starlin Castro, who's been injured, I was probably a little bit surprised that he made it. Gary Sanchez is another guy, I think, who, his offensive numbers certainly deserving. Alex Avila from Detroit was having a very good season. You can understand why, people want to see Gary Sanchez. I think he got in through the player vote. So it's obviously, why he's gotten a lot of props. I mean, he's a very deserving guy and extremely, the kind of young player who really attracts a lot of good, positive attention to baseball.
Hey, coming out of the weekend, we found out just how darn good this Houston Astros team is for sure. Yankees have now lost 14 of 19. They trail Boston by 3. Jerry, are we seeing the Yankees come a little bit undone, or are they coming undone for good this season? How do you look at the Yankees right now?
Yeah, I don't know that they're coming undone for good. I thought maybe there was a little too much hype around them early in the season. I mean, they have some veterans who are good players who were, maybe a little over their skis early. And, I think it's tough when you have kids like Aaron Judge and Sanchez, these young guys, to expect them to just not encounter any hiccups. It's a long, grueling season. And obviously, the starting pitching, you would really, you depended on that to hold up and for them to be successful. And Severino's obviously been very good, but they've had some injuries. Tanaka's been disappointing. So you have to think that they're going to maybe try to do something with the starting pitching, and they're not alone in that club.
Jerry, how deep into that farm system would you go if you're the Yankees? And I guess it depends on which starting pitcher they target, but how aggressive do you think they'll be given, they've really changed course here in order to reload that farm system?
Oh, you mean in terms of like making a trade and giving something up, I guess? Yeah, I think you don't want to get too crazy with that, especially for like short-term fixes. You don't want to trade kids for guys who are, say a Johnny Cueto, just for example, who has an opt-out after the season, it might be a 2-month rental. I mean, nobody really these days is going to give up elite prospects for a couple months of a pitcher. We saw Texas, obviously, at one point a couple of years ago, give up a bunch of guys for Cole Hamels, but he had, I think, 3 years left on his contract. So if you're going to go after a pitcher, you're probably going to try to get whether it's like a Sonny Gray or a Garrett Cole, or those are the type of guys, a Chris Archer, somebody who has some years left on his contract and some club control. Although I can't imagine Tampa being too excited about trading Chris Archer to the Yankees and having to face him. So it's kind of slim pickings. There just aren't that many young, controllable impact pitchers out there that you can go for without just giving away a massive amount of young talent.
Let me ask you this question, Jerry, in terms of Clint Frazier. What a debut he had over the weekend, right? I mean, it was a home run and a double, and the kid was having a lot of fun. What's your thoughts on Frazier and the plans for him?
Well, I've always been partial to the guy because he's a fellow redhead, so I was excited to see that. But I saw him at the Futures game last year, and he comes in, and he's a kid with some swagger. He's probably got a little bit of that touch of Bryce Harper in him, which I like. I like a kid who comes in and is maybe a little cocky, and maybe he says some things, and you say, geez, not typically deferential for a young player, but that's the kind of kid in your system. I mean, when you look at it, it's just funny. You think about, if you can get one kid to, say, click a season out of your farm system, and they've obviously had Sanchez and Judge. I mean, if Clint Frazier, he doesn't even have to be like the best hitter in your lineup. If he's sort of that, third or fourth best guy in your team, like a Tino Martinez hitter or somebody, or Bernie Williams, like if he's a kid who can just go out there and be a producer and a stat collector, you already have a couple of potential superstars. So, certainly a kid you have to be excited to see, and, we'll just see. They have to adapt, and Aaron Judge is going to have to do that too. They figure out your weakness and they try to probe that, and you have to adjust and try to find a way to counteract that.
And on the other flip side of that, I still cannot get over what happened to Dustin Fowler on Thursday night, and how awful that was. And now the surgery went well, but it's going to be 6 months before he's going to be able to get back. But there was a moment over the weekend, I did read, Jerry, where the entire team, or a good portion of the team, FaceTimed him.
I didn't see that, but that is really speaks well to them, and obviously what this kid means. I mean, I saw the clips from Joe Girardi and how devastated he was. I think we all know, everybody in the game knows how difficult it is to make it up there, and you always see these kids playing their first game and having the family in the stands and, getting that first hit and throwing the ball back in the dugout. And for him to have that happen without even getting to the plate is just, it's just really sad. But he seems like a great kid, and look, I think he'll overcome this and he'll get to the big leagues, and hopefully he'll have a really solid career. But that was a real emotional downer, obviously, to see something like that happen, and definitely just bizarre to see it happen before he even got to come to the plate.
Jerry, I will echo your sentiments on Clint Frazier as a fellow redhead as well. We need more of them in professional sports, and we need more of them in the media too, for crying out loud. From the Mets perspective, obviously another regional team of interest of ours. To what degree will they be sellers at the deadline? And I know I'm asking you to project past this series with the Nationals and even almost an entire month, but who would you expect New York to move if they are sellers at the deadline?
Well, look, I think they have to play this out as long as they can. Atlanta all of a sudden won 10 out of 14 and is like, I wouldn't say necessarily a big threat, but it's kind of hard to pull the plug when you're playing well. So they got to give it a little more time. But I do think, obviously, the names that you've been hearing, the Curtis Granderson and Jay Bruce and Asdrubal Cabrera, guys like that, older guys. The problem is Bruce is having a hell of a season, but he's going to be a free agent. And Granderson's, I think, 36 years old and isn't quite the same player. I don't know if Asdrubal Cabrera is going to bring you a huge return. So I think they're another team that has some short-term veteran type of guys they'd want to sell. And, they just have to come to grips with what do they have in this rotation, beyond DeGrom, at least, who's held up. What do you have in Harvey? Syndergaard, I think, is really good, but he is going to have to come back from an injury. What do you have in Zach Wheeler and Robert Gazelman and, the whole Steven Matz? I mean, there's so many young guys, and it's just tough to predict with young players. And for the Mets, everything has just gone in the wrong direction this year, unfortunately.
Jerry, one more for me, and if you talk pitching, and if this Boston Red Sox staff can get maybe Price to be a little bit more consistent and get Porcello, who will pitch tonight, turned around because he's not had a good year. Pomeranz on a roll, Sales pitching great. I mean, all of a sudden, in Boston, we know they can hit. They're turning out to be the team that I think many people thought they would be in the preseason leading up to the start of the year. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, they've had some hiccups. I think they had a little bit of David Ortiz withdrawal. It just seemed like they weren't scoring runs, and offensively they didn't seem like the same club. They probably, they're not the same club, but all of a sudden you see Jackie Bradley, who was hitting like 180, now is up to like 280, and Mookie Betts and Xander Bogaerts are still having nice seasons. But we're talking about guys who are still young veterans, So, but yeah, I think the one thing they have is they have Craig Kimbrell, who is an absolute lockdown, shutdown closer. And you look at Washington and some of these other teams. I mean, if you're a team like the Red Sox with Kimbrell or the Dodgers with Kenley Jansen, that's a big thing not to have to go out and pursue. So you're right. I think the guys are there. They have the pieces in place. These guys just have to start performing to their ability behind Chris Sale in that rotation.
Jerry Crasnick, always a pleasure. Thanks for a few minutes. ESPN.com on Major League Baseball and certainly on our regional teams of interest here in the Capital Region. Thank you, Jerry. Have a great holiday weekend. Happy 4th to you.
You too, guys.
Thank you, Jerry.